Hey guys, and welcome to Christian Business Freedom. This is going to be the podcast where we talk to Christian business owners, Christian entrepreneurs who are out there in the world glorifying God through their platforms. Guys, my name's Scott. I'm going to be the host of this podcast. And sort of the background on what we're doing here is I'm a former gym owner. I was challenged pretty early on in my first business by one of my trainers to pray before every workout, something I got super nervous about. I didn't want to alienate any of my customers. I knew I had some non-believers. I knew I had some people of other faiths, but it was a challenge that the Holy Spirit, I felt him working in my heart about. And so it's something we started. And to my surprise, nobody ever complained. Nobody ever got offended. And it was something that everybody actually really enjoyed. It was a community building exercise. So on this podcast, what we're going to do is we're trying to do the same thing to you that my trainer did. I'm going to empower you to take your platform, glorify God, use the platform that he's given you. It all belongs to him anyway. So today, podcast episode 1, I got David Waldy on the line here with me. How are you doing, David?
I'm great, man. So good to be here, Scott. I'm super excited about our conversation today. I hope that it proves to be useful for everyone that listens to this, and I'm stoked for the conversation, man.
Yeah, absolutely. So give us a little background. I have to tell you, I stalked your Facebook profile this morning a little bit, and I saw that you're expecting.
Yeah, man. Yeah, we just announced this morning baby number 3. So my squad is growing and super excited. We don't know boy or girl yet. We'll find out here in a little bit, but I have a daughter named Emmi Sage. She is 3. She's about to turn 4. And I have a son. His name is Bear Daniel. He will turn 2 in November. And my wife and I, Jessie, we've been married for 7 years. We live here in South Carolina, and man, just loving life. So grateful, super blessed.
That's awesome. I got three as well. I got a 9-year-old, and then I got 2 boys that are 14 months apart, 2 and 1. So I got
love it.
Almost Irish twins right there at the end.
It's so good, man.
Yeah. So anyway, let's tell me about yourself. Give me a little bit of background and why you became an entrepreneur. And then we'll go from there.
For sure, man. So Scott, honestly, entrepreneurship was one of those things that I honestly avoided for most of my life coming out of school, because early on, probably similar to many of your listeners, we all go through life. Like, life happens. I come from a divorced family. Growing up, I didn't understand my dad's philosophy about being an entrepreneur. He was a veterinarian, but he started his own practice, and so very entrepreneurial. But I didn't really see him a lot growing up. He was working all the time. As a vet, I grew up in Kansas, and so Midwestern boy. And so he was always on the call, horses and cows and goats and chickens and all the stuff, plus, dogs and cats and everything in between. And so for me, becoming an entrepreneur was always something that I had this thing inside, but I also had this tremendous resistance, because for some reason I had this belief that entrepreneurship destroyed families, right? And unfortunately, when I was 13, we packed up from the Midwest, moved to Florida. My parents just knew they needed a change if they were going to make it work. Unfortunately, it ended up that it didn't work. And so I went from, this 70, 80 acres of family land, being in the country, to suburbia culture shock, where I could stick my hand out the window and touch my neighbor. And so my childhood was just, there were some challenges, man. And so for me, entrepreneurship was one of those things, again, that I had some limiting beliefs about it. I know that now, my dad, in retrospect, recognizing that that was the best form of love that he knew how to give, was to work hard and give my family opportunities, when really as a kid, I just wanted my dad, right? And now I have an incredible relationship with him now. My dad is my hero. I love the man to death. I'm very, very blessed. But in all that, again, with the entrepreneurship, long story short, I graduated high school with a full ride academic scholarship, worked my butt off in high school, and I turned it down. I said, this is not for me. Wow. Even though I'm not going to have to pay for school, I do not see the return on investment. And every single friend that I know that has gone to school, with the exception of specialty degrees, like if you're going to go become a doctor, lawyer, et cetera, none of them were using their degrees, and they got out of school and just said, oh, now I got to take a job and pay back all my student loans, and still don't know what I want to be when I grow up. And I said, that's not for me. So I moved to South Carolina to do a 2-year internship program called South Carolina School of Leadership, where it was a heavy emphasis on ministry. But I didn't feel called to be a pastor. That was what was interesting. I loved the heart of ministry and what it looked like as far as communication, community, developing relationships, serving people. And in that, what was interesting is I learned a lot about interpersonal communication. I learned a lot about business leadership. I learned a lot about, strengths, identifying who we are as human beings, and really defining who I was as a person, and stepping into manhood, I guess I would say. But throughout that,
It's
go ahead.
interesting though, because like I've seen that a lot where entrepreneurs have sort of a call to some sort of ministry, but not towards, because I have a very similar story. Like I was told all growing up that, hey, you need to be a pastor, you should be a pastor, but I have not. The Holy Spirit has never pulled me to being to the ministry in that direction. So that's very interesting. So keep going. I want to hear more about that.
Yeah. So it was because I started working in, quote unquote, working in ministry, serving in ministry when I was 14, man. So I've been in active ministry week in and week out since I was 14. 31 now. And so that's a lot of years. I don't know how many years that was, 17 years basically. And so my thing is,
that was good math on the fly, man. I never do math in public.
I'm trying to think of like, but my wife and I, like, for example, we met leading on a worship team at our church. That's how we came to meet each other. But all that to say, through the process, I came out of that having a better understanding of what I felt like was this concept of modeling, right? Where I looked at all these different people that had achieved some level of success, and whether it was in ministry or financially or relationally or whatever it was. And I started to realize that there's the model that we have for success in business, success in relationships, success in finances, all these different types of things. They've been wrapped into a system that says this is how it's supposed to be. And we've abandoned this system that worked for thousands of years of masters and apprentices, of learning from someone that had actually achieved success in a given area. And so I was the guy who I would find the couple that had been married for 60 years. And I'd go to them and I'd say, how do I create a marriage that lasts for 60 years, right? I would find the business owners that I felt like, were the type of business owners I wanted to be, is not just for all this stuff, but really impacting community, very, very wealthy. But at the same time, we're constantly serving, constantly giving, just philanthropic, just incredible, kind-hearted human beings. And so this concept of modeling for me really started from a young age of saying, if I want to succeed in any given area, I believe that the most effective way to do that is to model greatness, to find someone that has created success in that given area. And so through that process, I ended up going into the workforce. I actually went back to school for a semester and was like, yep, confirmed my suspicions. This is not for me. So I dropped out and I went into the workforce just in sales and marketing. I built a really successful career working for a company, became a top 1% producer in a $400 million a year company, and ended up finding out that I had a unique approach to sales and marketing, that I wasn't the script guy. I didn't follow the protocols. I didn't do things the way that they said. And I started catching some eyeballs from corporate leadership. They're like, all right, what are you doing that is creating this? And I was generating millions and millions and millions of dollars in revenue for this company. And so I ended up, that's where I started cutting my teeth on coaching. They transitioned me into a role where I had the opportunity to work with some of the highest performing salespeople and helping them understand kind of my methodology to sales. And my methodology to sales has always been that I find success in serving people well, that I believe with leading with empathy. What were you saying? Go ahead.
No, that's the key there, right? Like in order to sell, like you're not manipulating somebody. I have a background in sales too. And sort of the definition, when you say I'm a sales guy, it's right. It's back used car salesman who's trying to get you to buy a lemon, when in reality, true sales is finding somebody's problem and then offering them a solution for that problem and serving them well. So that's great. So you took all this information that you got from these super successful business owners, and now you're passing it on to more people. You're taking the information. It's worthless if you don't do anything with it, and you're giving it to other people.
Yeah, that's where, I started cutting my teeth in the quote. I didn't identify as a coach in that capacity, but I recognized that's really what I was doing. I was coming alongside people, helping them to not only learn for themselves how to implement and execute and create different systems, but really holding them accountable and saying, what is your motivation behind this? If you're going into a conversation, are you leading with empathy? Are you genuinely seeking to understand the heart of that other individual, what their problems are, what their pains are? Do you really see this person? Because it's only in that space space where someone feels seen, heard, and understood, that real rapport and trust is created. And when we do that, and we actually go through this qualification process, you know this in sales, when we actually qualify the people that we want to serve, instead of saying, hey, I've got something, like just throw me your money, right? And we're actually qualifying, the role gets flipped. And now it's the individual that I'm selling to has to convince me why I'm the best fit for them. And it's this weird flip of the script, because I want to make sure that my integrity is in alignment when I'm presenting something to someone and saying,
or in class, flip the script. That's a great
yeah,
one.
exactly, man. Dude, just flip the script.
Yep.
And in doing that, you find that you create just a beautiful client relationship where the person not only recognizes the value, they feel cared for, and the lifetime customer value of that individual. It's insane, because they feel like, wow, okay, you're not just here to sell me something, you're here to help me solve these problems, and you actually care. And so, long story short, that's what kind of cut my teeth in the coaching space, which led to, me acquiring a new skill set. And through a series of events, I had a really hard season in that company where there was some betrayal. I was pushed into a position I didn't want, $40,000 pay cut. My wife and I went through a miscarriage. We had recently bought a house, and that, we couldn't afford because of the pay cut. And then I came out about some stuff that was going on behind the scenes at the corporate level that I, just for sensitivity purposes, was not okay, like not okay at all.
Didn't reflect your values. You obviously have a set of values.
Yeah. And there were some things that were said, things that were being done. So I came to the owners about it. And unfortunately that backfired on me bad. Yeah. And I'll never forget the day, Scott. If you've ever watched those movies, the scene in the conference room with like the giant table, and there's the person on one side and then the others on the other side. That's exactly what happened. And I ended up, I was cussed out. I was berated. I was demeaned. I was, my job was threatened. And at the time, it was terrifying. We had gone through that miscarriage. Then we were pregnant again. And I was like, I can't lose this job. What is going on? And so I had to come to Jesus. I had to come to Jesus about entrepreneurship and assessing, okay, this skill set that I've developed over these years and just what I've been able to accomplish. Number one, founded in the blessing and favor of God. I know you and I both recognize that, but I wanted to help other people. And I was kind of done with that company. And long story short, again, I decided I was going to start building my own coaching practice after hours, helping people understand sales and marketing, because I felt like it would be useful in different industries outside of the one that I was a part of. And through that process, I was able to build up my own business after hours. I mean, it was long days, because I had achieved the quote unquote success in the corporate world, like 6-figure job, glass corner office, company car, company card, like the whole 9 yards. And so for most of the outside world to look at me trying to transition into entrepreneurship was insanity. Like I had the American dream, right? It's like, that's the thing. That's what everybody wants to have. And I was miserable.
You had the Instagram life. That's what I like about the Instagram life. That's what you had. But inside, like you're struggling. You're being pulled in another direction, and you're with a company that your value that didn't align with your values. And I think that's a lot of people end up into entrepreneurship like that, but it's a little bit of a leap, right? Like you gotta, like if you
a little bit, it was a lot of leap to go from 6 figures to zero was terrifying. But was really cool.
Lean in on God a little bit, and
100%. It was God all along. And I believe that God allowed those things to happen. And this is how I always see it. Tony Robbins, I actually had the honor of sharing the stage with Tony Robbins last year. And my team actually developed some programs for him for one of his companies, which was really cool. But he always says that life is happening for you. And despite how you feel about Tony Robbins, I know a lot of people are not a fan. He uses a lot of F words, but I believe that is in line with what I believe is God is happening for us. God is happening for us. And if we're willing to learn the lessons and listen and pay attention to what is being said through all of the things we experience, we can hear the voice of God through that. And so for me, I felt like it was the Lord allowing these things in my life to kind of push my butt out the door and say, David, I've called you to these things. I've called you this other stuff, but you've been rejecting it because of fear of losing your family, fear of destroying your family, fear of, greed, fear of, okay, what happens when you do create this success and all the judgment that's going to come from all of the quote unquote Christians, right? And all the people that don't understand. And the people that are like, oh no, you're a little too much, right? You need to settle down, just, be meek and mild and whatnot.
I've always kind of my experience with God is that I always, and this has happened several times in my life, where I'll feel a pull to something, right? But I'll kind of ignore it. And then there will be something a little bit bigger that happens that will increase the feel of that pull. Like, okay, God, like I know what you're saying, but I'm just not ready yet. And then, so it's like I'm going to suggest it to you. I'm going to tell it to you. But then if you keep denying what's going on, I'm going to make you do it eventually. Like I'm going to put some hurdles in your way that are going to force you in the direction that I want to go and that I want you to go. That's like, if you want to hear God laugh, tell him your plans, so.
Yeah. And
that's similar. It sounds like that's very similar to what's happening here.
It is. And I think what's interesting is holding these two things in tension, though, is that there's a lot of Christians, a lot of business entrepreneurs, business leaders that I think there's this tension between trusting and holding on to and waiting for God, while at the same time recognizing Jeremiah 29:11 says, "For I know the plans that I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you." But I think a lot of Christians, and I don't want to sound judgmental, so hear my heart here. A lot of Christians take the excuse of waiting on God as a justification for not taking action when the plan is the plan, but someone has to execute the plan, and we are co-laborers. We are stewards of that plan of our lives. And so I believe when God is created, he's saying, you were made in my image. So that means go create, go develop, go build, go become. And I have a mentor of mine that this changed my life, Scott, and I hope your audience finds it useful. He says, what if the call of God on our lives is not an expectation to live up to? It's not something to fail, but rather it's a promise to live out of because of our identity of recognizing that we are sons and daughters of God. We are kings and queens. And man, that shifted everything for me, because I had lived my whole life, like many people, saying, God, I don't know what you've called me to do. Like, what's my calling? Like, I know I'm not supposed to be a pastor. I don't like, what is the thing? And so I kept feeling like I was failing, because I couldn't figure out what everyone else around me, the rest of the world, seemed to have figured out. They all had the plan, right?
Let me reword that for you just a little bit, because I've got a great parallel here for you. Because I'm a fitness guy. I used to be 300 pounds. So I found fitness and started giving that to other people. And the thing that I would tell everybody, who the clients at my gym, was, God, inside of our bodies, God has put infinite potential, right? That's why we break world records every 4 years at the Olympics. But that's also why we have shows like My 600-Pound Life, right? Inside of us is unlimited potential. And when you say, no, it's limited, well, no, because we haven't found it yet, because we keep expanding what we think the body is possible of through science and understanding. And I think it's very similar in business and in growth and in serving other people. We have unlimited potential. You could sit on your couch and play video games all day, right? And are you failing? Not if that's what makes you happy, but I feel like God has challenged us to find our potential. And if we don't even look for our potential, or we don't go on a journey to find that potential, I think that's where we fail. Because how sad is it to live your life and never find what you can do, what your possibilities are. So, in line with that, but money's the root of all evil, right, David? I hear this excuse a lot from business owners. Go ahead. No, because I got a lot of thoughts on this as well.
So that was a massive mental block for me for most of my life, particularly when I was just working in sales, because I was in my early 20s making $100,000 a year. None of my friends were doing that. And I didn't want people to know. I was terrified of what was going to happen, because I was creating financial success in my life. And I was like, well, I'm not chasing the money, but it's coming because I'm serving people and I'm helping. So how do I navigate this? Like rich people are like the dirt bags of the world. Like all the wealthy people are greedy. And then what we talked about before, I started recognizing, wait a minute, there are absolutely, call them a-hole jerky wealthy people. Yeah. But I've also known countless wealthy people that are the most generous, kind-hearted, servant-hearted, philanthropic. And then I thought about the other side. Wait. I've seen the same thing from poor people. Mm-hmm. People that don't have a lot of wealth. I've seen some of the most kind-hearted, gentle, just amazing human beings that don't have financial resource. And I've also met some people that I'm just like, you are not a nice human, right? And what I realized in that was that a couple of things. Number one, money is amoral. It doesn't have any morals. It's a tool. It's a resource. It is something that I believe, especially in the day and age we live in, money touches everything, but we have idolized it on both ends, idolized it to being greedy and covetous for it, but then also idolized it as this God in our lives, particularly when we don't have it, because all we're fixated on is the money when we're saying, I'm relying on God, but I really, really, really need the money, right? Because I got to pay my bills. And I actually did a study on this. Now, I am no Greek or Hebrew scholar. Okay. Now I do have some ministry credential background stuff. Like I went through, some seminary classes. I understand a little bit about it, but I'm by no means am an expert. But in my studies around that verse specifically, if we think about the word love, right? In the English language, there's only one word for the word love.
Well, let's just clarify, because I said money is the root of all evil, but the actual,
right.
The love of money is the root of all evil.
Yeah. So people start by obviously splitting it by saying money is the root of all evil. Well, you and I both know that's not the full context of the sentence.
I think it's an excuse actually for a lot of people, because they're so scared of failing that they use that as an excuse. And I'm going to let you finish your thought, but my philosophy on it is this actually selfish to not try to live to an excess? Because if you're just making your bills and you're just making enough money, living paycheck to paycheck just to pay for yourself, how selfish are you, right? Like, I'm not saying that you're purposely in that position, right? But if you're not striving for better, because until you can take care of yourself, you can't help other people. And that's really what we're called to do, is help others. So keep going.
And it's funny we're talking about this, because I actually did a video on this morning, is that, there's a transition that happens where part of me, like, and this is another thing I hold in tension. Early on as an entrepreneur, I had to do whatever it took. I was building my business, but I couldn't draw income from it. And when I made that leap and that transition out of corporate, I had to humble myself and say, all right, I'm going to do whatever's necessary to take care of my family while I build this thing. I wasn't going to be too proud to say I'm not going to go take another job as I'm building this thing to make sure my family's taken care of. But you're right. There's this transition that happens when you start to recognize, and I mean this with all sensitivity. And so anyone that's listening, please hear and understand my heart. I am not wanting to demonize anyone that is struggling or dealing with things or trying to figure it out.
No,
this is just facts.
The struggle is part of the process, I believe.
The struggle is part of the process, but broke people, they don't fund cancer research. They don't build schools. They don't build churches. They don't build orphanages. They don't support hospitals because they can't. And I'm not saying that as an emotional, spiritual thing. That's not what I'm saying. It's just a fact. It's just a fact of the resource that you have access to, because the core focus is, I need to take care of my needs and my family and provide. What happens though, when you're on the other side of that, what I call often scarcity mindset, is recognizing how that unlimited potential of what in the world could flow through my life that is the provision and abundance of the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, the creator of heaven and earth. What would it look like to live a life surrendered where that financial resource flows in and through me and actually affects change in the areas that I want to see, or that I feel like that God has placed on my heart? And so I say that because of that verse. A lot of people even say, well, it's the love of money is the root of all evil. That's the bad thing. And I want to even stop them there. That's also not true. The English language has one word for love. I love tacos. I also love my wife. It's love. Like, contextually, we don't understand and what that really means.
That's why we get along so well, because our mutual love of tacos.
Right. Dude, tacos, man. Tacos and ribs, bro. That's how it is. When in studying that verse, what I found is that the actual translation of that, the closest translation that is in the English language, is the greedy covetousness of money.
Yeah.
And the best way that we in the English language could translate that was love, the love of money. Love and greedy covetousness are two very, very, very different things. And that's where I think a lot of times we miss it in recognizing that it's not all about the money. If you create a business and you succeed in financial and your family is falling apart, your relationships and your health and all these other things, guess what? I'm going to call you out on that, because that is not the kingdom. It is creating the abundance in all of our areas. And that's where I think a lot of entrepreneurs miss it, is they get so focused on, okay, I got to succeed in business, but I got to be careful because I don't want to be too successful. And then they're doing it focused on these areas, and then they lose all the rest. There's just so many different elements that go into recognizing at the end of the day, this is about your potential and what God has placed inside of our hearts, every single one of us. And we have lived most of our lives playing small, man. Playing small. And I think in a lot of cases, it's used more of an excuse. Like you were saying, like, I see it a little bit different. Like, if you think about when Peter's out on the boat and Jesus calls him into the water, right? Like, he had to take that first step. And so a lot of us are in the boat, right? And we hear Jesus and we see Jesus out there calling us, saying, hey, come on, I'm gonna hold you up. But we don't trust it, right? Like, it's hard to take that first step. And so instead of taking that first step into success and where I can see it going, because it might fail, because there's that possibility that's sitting there. You take that first step. Well, I got enough to take care of my family. Money's the root of all evil. I don't want to make any more money because I don't want to ruin my relationship. I don't need it. Yeah, I don't need it. Yeah, which you don't. You may not. I don't need everything that God has given me at all, but I can't help other people if I'm only taking care of me. So this seems to be a theme that we've talked through twice now. It's so good though, man, because I think, like, even your, the example of getting out of the boat and failing, that back to what we were talking about earlier in this conversation, is that if you believe that God is for you and you believe and have found identity in being a son of the living God, a father who loves and cares about you, even if you have this perception of failure, a righteous man, it's up over and over and over again. You didn't fail.
Let's get this out of the way. How many times have you failed in your journey, David? And I'm going to do this. I'm going to do the air quotes. Like, you can't, there's a video too, but if you're listening on Spotify, I'm doing air quotes right now. How many times have you heard, how old are you, David? 31, you said?
31. Yeah. Okay. 31.
How many times have you failed in your journey to entrepreneurship? Because I've lost count, honestly. I have lost count, but that's where people don't understand, is that failure is not final if you don't allow it to be. Failure has this opportunity. I define it as feedback. It's simply feedback to learn and grow, which anchors back to our first concept of, you can mitigate failure to an extent, but you're going to lose at some point. But a winner, and someone that is winning in life, even when they lose, look at how they handle the loss. Yeah. It is different than a losing mindset. It's different than someone that is a quote unquote loser. And I don't want to call anybody loser here, but you know what I mean? It's just that, like, you got Tom Brady Super Bowl this last year. Did he quit when he threw an interception? Like, that's how I look at failing, right? Like, I'm trying to win this game. Just because I threw an interception doesn't mean I'm going to go sit on the bench the rest of the game. That's silly, right? Like, if Tom Brady did that, he wouldn't be a champion.
And the thing I love about competition too, and this is what's hard sometimes in entrepreneurship, because I always tell people, this is how I view competition, is that competition is healthy for me to learn and grow, but it's not something that I need to compare to, because it's a different journey. And a lot of people, they lose momentum and traction because they're unhealthily comparing, or they're competing in a way that says, I'm doing this to beat this other company. Yes. I want to beat my competition. And what I say is, no, if we align with potential, I'm not trying to beat anybody but who I was yesterday. That is it. That is the game. And the cool thing about, like, sports, if you think about it this way too, with business, just because you lose the game If you choose to go back out on the field and start another game, you have a new opportunity to win.
So a couple of people I want to bring up here.
Yeah.
And I think they're both secular, but there's still some great lessons we can learn in there. Grant Cardone is one, but so first of all, Andy Frisella, he welcomes failure. He talks in his CEO podcast. He wants to fail. Like he doesn't want to fail, but he welcomes it because every time he fails, he learns from it.
Yep.
And so have you experienced that as well in your life?
I have. It's just a perspective, and that's where people miss it. It's a very simple perspective that says, all right, I can't control everything that happens. I cannot control all of these different variables that occur, but the one thing that I can control is how I respond. And most people are living this reactionary life. It's very defensive. It's a fragile existence as they're trying to mitigate all of the stuff by living in the future. They're not fully present because they're worried and anxious and thinking about all these things, or they're living in the past and the shouldas and the would'ves and the could'ves, but failing to be fully present in the moment because they're trying to protect themselves from something that you cannot protect yourself from. The only thing you can actually control is how you respond.
Yeah.
That perspective, Andrew Frisella, you're talking about, Sarah Blakely is another one, the founder of Spank. When she was growing up, her dad, every single day, have you heard this?
No, I've heard a lot of her stories though. She's on Shark Tank a lot. So
yeah, it's just incredible. One of the things that I heard her say one time is that every single day, her dad, when they'd sit down for dinner, would ask her, "What did you fail in today?" And it wasn't for guilt. It wasn't for shame. It wasn't for condemnation. It wasn't for putting her down. It was always with the motivation of saying, okay, what did you learn?
Yeah.
And when we treat failure that way, man, like, and for everyone listening, if you start treating all of the crap that is happening in your life as opportunities to learn, and you just choose to see it as potential feedback, you will recognize that most people are forfeiting their autonomy.
Yeah.
Instead of coming to alignment and saying, no, I always get to decide how I respond to this. It might suck. It might be really hard. It might not make any sense. I might be questioning God, my mother-in-law, and everything else on this planet, but I get to decide how to respond.
It's literally the only thing you can control. Like as humans, we are trying to constantly control everything going on around us, when in reality, the only thing we can control is our reaction to the things that are going on. I can't control my spouse. I can't control my kids. I can't control my boss. I can't control my clients. I can control me and my reaction to those people. And in that gives me a certain level of comfort when we're trying to control the people around us. Really what we want is to control our emotions, because these people are giving us negative emotions based on or positive emotions, right? When in reality, you have control, regardless of what people around you do, you have control of that. You know, it's a learned skill, of course, but
it is. It's there's an incredible book by a secular writer, but it's called Loving What Is by Byron Katie. And it's this concept. There's not, just like every book for anyone that reads books, you'll find that there's a lot of stuff that you'll read that you're like, I don't agree with that, but there's always gold nuggets if you're looking for them. Always. And in this book, her concept of loving what is, for those that are looking at developing more of that emotional intelligence of there might be some people listening being like, okay, that sounds great, Scott. That sounds awesome, David, but how? Like, how do I do that? Because all I feel is overwhelm. All I feel is anxiety. I feel like the world is against me. I feel like everywhere I turn, it's my spouse and my clients and my partner and all these things. How can I be better at responding appropriately? And
please tell me. I need help too.
Okay. So this is what I've learned. We can't control the thoughts and the feelings, the emotions that come all the time, but there's a cycle that we go through. Okay. Our beliefs lead to our thinking patterns. Our thinking patterns lead to our feelings and our emotional state. And our feelings and our emotional state always lead to our actions. The actions, that series always creates a result. Always, whether positive or negative, right? What we believe, how we think, how we feel, what we do creates a result. And what I found is that most people are trying to change their beliefs, or they're trying to change their thoughts, or they're trying to control their emotions. They're trying to control their thoughts, control these things. rather than the practice of what I've adopted in every part of my being is I no longer try and stop the thoughts from coming. I no longer try and avoid the feelings and like, oh, I got a positive thinking today because my thoughts are not of the Lord and I got to feel better, even though I feel emotional and a wreck and I'm broken down and hurting or whatever it is. It's coming to this place where you start this process of questioning. It's called inquiry.
Yeah.
Where when the thought comes, this is straight scripture. Taking thoughts captive. I think most Christians have been conditioned to believe that that's talking about like impure thoughts, like sexual thoughts or bad or evil or whatever. And I'm almost intrigued to wonder if we've so contextualized it to that we've missed the power in what it looks like to actually question the thoughts that come, particularly those that are originating from outside sources or that we speak to ourselves. Because for years, Scott, I was that guy where, I'm outside loving people, like encouraging, edifying. I'd look at myself in the mirror and I effing hate you.
Yeah.
Who do you think you are? Like straight profanity, speaking that and thinking those things. And I just want to finish this thought real quick. The reason I share that is because it's in that's real. That's raw. That's like vulnerability before God. I can remember the day like that cussed God out basically and was like, this is BS. and all I heard was, I love you, son. And I've realized that it's not about trying to change those thoughts. It's about questioning them and saying, okay, is this thought useful or not useful?
Yeah.
Is it in alignment with the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, or is this in alignment with the flesh? And we wrestle with that flesh and blood, that's our spirit. And that is how I've found to develop this emotional intelligence is not about controlling your thoughts, controlling your emotions. It's responding in the exact same way by holding them in tension and questioning that thought that comes and saying, is this useful?
Yeah.
Not.
And I think it's Andy Frisella again. I'm going to keep mentioning the same people over and over again, but if I'm wrong on that, don't quote me. But this is something that changed my life. And it's very similar to what you're talking about here, where if you can imagine there being two presences in your mind, right? Like it's not schizophrenia, but there's two voices in your head, right? There's the one who sends you the idea, right?
Yep.
Like you're a failure, right?
Yep.
Hey, don't go to the gym today. There's other things you need to do. Hey, you know what? Like getting the kids ready for church today. Like, man, it's going to be a big pain in the ass. Like, let's not do that, right?
Right.
And then there's the you that decides whether or not to listen. Right.
Yep.
So you are not the thought. You are the decider. And so when you think something, it doesn't mean you have to act on it. It doesn't mean that's who you are. That is literally a thought. Well, now let's as a soul lean on God and say, hey, God, is this really what I need to do? Because we're all lazy. Like I don't want to get up at 4:00 in the morning and go to the gym every day. I mean, some days I'm pumped up and I'm ready to go. Like I roll out the door. Some days I got to drag myself in there. Same thing with church, like some days I don't want to go to church every Sunday. Like, and I have those thoughts and I've you can put that in any aspect of your life, whether it's sexual temptation, whether it's temptation to spend your money on things you shouldn't be spending your money on, or to hoard, whatever it is. You literally get to decide whether or not you follow those thoughts, which is pretty much what you were just saying there.
Yeah. It's the mind is a powerful tool that God has given us. And I think that many of us grew up not understanding how to process things, how to actually feel emotion, especially as men, like how to feel emotion, but be in control of that emotion at the same time, like how to really feel, but being in control of that and allowing ourselves to experience the fullness of life, but at the same time, taking those thoughts captive and holding them in tension before the Lord and saying, is this aligned? Because a lot of times, and we hear this a lot in Christian circles as well, is a lot of times people think those thoughts are from the enemy. And now I'm not saying that not all of them are, but most of the time it's not necessarily the devil. It's just, what's that?
Conditioning. It's repetitiveness. It's our outside world, the things we see, the things we experience.
Yeah.
And I do believe some of them do come directly from the enemy, but
I agree. And that's why I always ask, is it useful? Because even it doesn't matter like where it originated from, is like, is this in line with the King? Is this something that God would be speaking or saying over me? And I found that most of us, we are really, really, really good at loving on other people, encouraging them, edifying them, building them up. But I think a lot of Christians in particular, particularly Christian entrepreneurs, we've grown up having no idea how to interact with ourselves and to be able to lovingly confront some of those thinking patterns, those things that happen, but also having grace and becoming our own best friend. There were years of my life, Scott, where I looked at myself in the mirror and I hated what I saw. I hated the man that I saw. I hated looking in my eyes. I hated everything about my body. I hated everything about how I thought. I hated everything about who I was. And the day that I started practicing what some people would call affirmations, which is, I believe, in alignment with scripture, claiming the promises of God and speaking them, I started practicing looking in my eyes and speaking things that I did not believe, that I knew were true. I didn't want to believe them. I knew they were true, but I didn't want to, I didn't feel them. I thought it was a joke. Creating that consistency. And I tell you what, man, over a series of probably 6 to 8 months, I fell in love with myself and I realized this is how God sees me.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Now we're running out of a little bit of time here, but I want to end on this topic and how we apply it to business. Cause again, fitness background. One of the things I tell people is, hey, if you hate running, literally every time you see somebody, tell them how much you love to run. It's not true. You hate running, right? Like, but every time you talk to somebody, be like, man, you know what? I love running. I love it. Every time you literally start conditioning yourself to believe the things you're saying. And that's sort of what you're talking about here is, hey, like leaning on God, take those godly thoughts and repeat them, because that's really what it is. Because we're so good at focusing on the negative. If you watch news cycles, if you watch entertainment, it's all negative. Like it's, murder podcasts are one of the number one podcasts, right? That's like, how negative is that? So it's really easy to focus on the negative because we've been conditioned to. But when we start looking at those, and it's almost like vanity to lean in on those positive thoughts of, man, you know what? I am a good at business. You know what? I am a good coach. I am a good instructor. I am a good husband. I am a good father. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean that you didn't yell at your kids when you shouldn't have. That doesn't mean that you didn't have an impure thought about another woman when you're married, because those are things that are going to happen, but it doesn't make you a bad father. Nope. What makes you a bad father is leaning in on that and then repeating the behavior, right? What makes you a bad husband is leaning in on the negativity and then keeping that action. You are not your actions, right? That's I am not what I did because I've made mistakes. Yeah. I am whatever I decide I want to be.
Yep. Well, interesting. I mean, that we're ending on this conversation, Scott. Back when Moses was chilling by the bush, who does God say that he is?
You have to go ahead. I'm drawing a blank here. You tell me.
So he says, he self-identifies, I am.
That's right.
And I think those are the two most powerful words, because when we start to, you were talking about, I am this, I am this, I am this, is that we failed to recognize that when we say those things in alignment with the King, we are actually manifesting in a very real way. We're manifesting a new being, that part of us that has been inside all along. I call it the process of becoming, is that we're becoming who God has intended and created us to be, because we're speaking the truth. I am this, in alignment with the creator of the universe who said, I am. Bringing ourselves, and a lot of the secular world calls this law of attraction. What's fascinating about law of attraction is 100% true, and it's 100% out of the Bible.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. It's not some voodoo magic. It's literally
it's not, because what you focus on and believe and what you actively communicate and visualize. We've lost the art of imagining and visualizing and saying, who is the man that I have been called to be, that I want to be, that God has placed inside of my heart, and then looking at my current life as an entrepreneur, as a business leader, as a husband, as a father, as a man, and saying, where is this disconnect between who I want to be and who I am? And then assessing, okay, from there, it becomes very clear what you need to do. Everyone's asking the question, well, what do I need to do to succeed? What do I need to do to grow my business? What do I need to do to be a better dad? It's not a bad question. It's just the wrong first question. It's, who do you need to become? And when you identify that as a man that is a child of the King, you are a king yourself, there's a whole lot of stuff that is going to start falling off, and you're going to know exactly what you need to do because you're going to say, I'm not aligned with that version of me.
So what you're
This
saying
has got to go.
People want change, but they don't want to change.
You can say that, man. Yep. Yeah.
Cool.
But if nothing changes, nothing changes, right?
So let's end here. Give me some empowerment, something that we can leave our listeners with, and tell our listeners how they can get in contact with you if they want to hear more.
For sure, Scott, man. So thank you for this. I think just the biggest thing I just want everyone that listens to this to recognize is that your life will start to change when you define who you want to become. And defining who you want to become is an act of surrender. It's an act of surrendering all of the feelings and emotions and the baggage and the pain and the struggle and all the shell that has formulated this version of who we are, and allowing the love, grace, kindness, goodness of God to pierce our hearts so we can extract that off, step into who we've been called to be. And in that place, you'll know what to do. It's not about trying to figure out what to do. It's about who you need to become. And when we do that, when we live our lives in alignment with that, God's call on our life. Again, like I mentioned earlier, the last thing that I'll say is a mentor of mine, his name's Cody Jefferson. He says the call and purpose of God on our lives is not an expectation to live up to. It's not something to fail. It's a promise that we have the opportunity to live out of. And I hope that's what everyone that listens to this today is, to live out of that promise and identify what in me needs to fall away, what in me needs to die, what in me needs to be laid down for me to follow the model that has been created for us through the life of Jesus.
I love that. Well, cool, man. How can people get in contact with you?
Yeah, just find me on social at David Waldy. So Waldy. It's like Waldo spelled with a Y. I'm on most of the platforms. I hang out most on Instagram, Facebook some, and then TikTok. Dude, I'm trying to figure out TikTok. It's a whole nother landscape over there. Yeah. But I also, for any entrepreneurs that are wanting to grow their business, I have a free community. It's called Generation Impact Group. You can actually go to www.generationimpactgroup.com. We have a free Facebook group, tons of resources, trainings, particularly if you're trying to grow your business online. You want to use organic marketing. You don't have to pay for ads and stuff like that. We love helping entrepreneurs. You find a lot of resources there, and I'm usually hanging out there as well. So
awesome, David. Well, for our listeners, if you are a Christian entrepreneur and you are currently navigating the trials and the rewards of glorifying God through your business, of living that godly life through entrepreneurship, go to our website, christianbusinessfreedom.com. Up at the top, there is a link, Be Our Guest. Go ahead and click on that and schedule a time to come on and be recorded. We want to hear from you. If you feel God's calling you to come be a guest and be featured here, we would love to have you, right? We're something we're trying to get going, and we want to talk to all of you. We want to empower Christian business owners to glorify God, to live a life of love in Jesus Christ, but also a life that is in a place where they can give, they can be generous, and they can serve others. So everybody, thanks for listening, and we hope you all have a great day.